The Washington morning didn't just buzz, it thrummed with a low, resonant hum of political tension, a sound like a coiled spring about to release. On the pristine marble steps of the Capitol, press crews, a phalanx of hungry lenses and microphones, adjusted their positions with the precision of snipers. Interns, their faces a mix of wide-eyed awe and frantic purpose, scurried like ants across the manicured lawns, clutching binders and whispering into earpieces. Over the East Lawn, usually a tranquil expanse, a charged silence hung heavy, almost suffocating, broken only by the distant wail of sirens and the occasional sharp command from a producer. Word had spread like wildfire through the digital trenches and hushed corridors. A live national debate, not between the usual seasoned party leaders, but between two of the sharpest, most unyielding tongues in American politics, was about to erupt. The air itself felt brittle, ready to crack under the weight of expectation. Then, a black SUV, sleek and anonymous, glided to a halt, and from its shadowed interior, Caroline Leavitt emerged. At a mere 29, the New Hampshire firebrand had already scorched more podiums and ignited more debates than most lifetime politicians twice her age. Her suit was sharp, tailored with an almost aggressive precision, and her eyes, a steely blue, held a gaze that promised no quarter. Beneath her blazer lapel, a small silver cross gleamed, catching the morning light, subtle yet unwavering, a silent testament to a conviction as unshakable as granite. She didn't offer a smile, not even a polite curve of the lips. She didn't need to. Her mission was etched into every line of her posture, every flicker of her gaze. Confront Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez live on C-SPAN over the controversial new federal equity education bill. Inside the ornate chamber, in the controlled chaos of the green room, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was already deep in preparation. She was not pacing, but rather seated, flipping through handwritten notes, the pages worn from countless revisions, her lips pressed tight in concentration. She knew Leavitt wasn't just another right-wing talking head, a predictable echo chamber of sound bites. Leavitt was articulate, ruthless, and, perhaps, most formidably, she carried the full, unyielding backing of the new conservative base, a force that included the undeniable looming shadow of Trump himself. This wasn't going to be a polite policy discussion. This was going to be a fight. Producers, their faces grimly focused, signaled 5 minutes to air. The distant echo of Leavitt's heels, sharp and deliberate, resonated down the marble hallway as she approached the prep area. There was no handshake, no perfunctory greeting, no attempt at civility, just eye contact. The kind that didn't just meet, it could cut glass. A silent challenge hurled across the divide. It was AOC who finally broke the tension-laden silence, her voice a low, direct challenge. "You came to grandstand or debate?" Caroline's lips, almost imperceptibly, curved into a slight knowing grin. "I came to finish your sentence before you twisted it into policy." And with that, the fire met gasoline. Across America, televisions flickered on, their screens glowing with anticipation. Phones buzzed with notifications, vibrating with the collective excitement. Clips from their past interviews, carefully curated by partisan algorithms, began circulating like wildfire across every digital platform. One side remembered Leavitt calling out bureaucratic hypocrisy in a congressional hearing, her voice a clarion call against what she saw as waste and overreach. The other recalled AOC's passionate speech, defending marginalized students, her words a defiant anthem for equity and justice. As the debate countdown hit 0, the screen faded from black, and the moderator's voice, a calm before the impending storm, rang out. Today, two bold voices collide on Capitol View. Please welcome Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt. Leavitt nodded coolly, a predator acknowledging its prey. AOC exhaled once, a subtle release of tension, then smiled wide, a flash of defiance. The nation leaned in, collectively holding its breath. The storm had arrived.
The debate began. Civil, at least For the first 30 seconds, a fragile truce before the inevitable explosion. AOC, poised and confident, opened with a meticulously crafted outline of the equity education bill. Her voice, steady and polished, wove a tapestry of opportunity, painting a future where every student, regardless of race, zip code, or inherited wealth, found a clear path forward. She invoked terms like structural disadvantage and educational justice, each phrase delivered with a measured cadence that drew subtle, almost imperceptible nods from the live audience, a silent chorus of agreement forming in the studio. Her argument was a smooth, flowing river, designed to carry listeners gently towards her conclusion. But Carolyn Leavitt wasn't there to nod. She waited, a coiled spring of her own, a faint smile playing on her lips, just enough to unnerve, to suggest a hidden agenda or a perfectly timed counterstrike. And when it was her turn, the river of AOC's rhetoric met a granite wall. Leavitt's voice was crisp, unshaken, cutting through the studio air like a surgeon's scalpel. "So, let me get this straight," she began, her tone dripping with incredulity. "You're asking taxpayers in rural America to bankroll DEI consultants in San Francisco schools while our own kids can't afford school lunches or see a nurse twice a week?" It wasn't a question seeking an answer. It was a rhetorical grenade lobbed directly into the heart of AOC's carefully constructed argument. She didn't wait for permission to continue, didn't pause for a breath. "This isn't justice," Leavitt declared, her voice rising with a controlled passion. "It's ideological theater funded by people who actually still believe in merit." The studio air tightened, palpable tension replacing the earlier hum. The moderator blinked, caught off guard. AOC's eyebrows arched, a silent signal of her rising indignation. "Caroline," AOC shot back, her voice now edged with a sharp retort, "you talk about merit like everyone starts at the same line. But where was your outrage when private schools got federal bailouts during COVID, while inner-city kids didn't even have Wi-Fi?" The question hung in the air, a direct challenge to Leavitt's perceived hypocrisy. Caroline leaned in, her steely eyes unwavering, meeting AOC's gaze head-on. "I'm outraged every day," she countered, her voice a low, fierce growl, "for every American student stuck in a system built on politics instead of performance. But your solution is more politics. You're not fixing the system, you're weaponizing it." Boom! The sound wasn't audible in the studio, but it reverberated across the digital landscape. Twitter lit up, a furious constellation of hashtags. Hashtag Leavitt versus AOC, hashtag Bronx Granite, and hashtag Red Fire Blue Storm became trending before the moderator could even regain control of his own voice. Behind the cameras, producers whispered frantically into headsets, their faces a mix of shock and exhilaration. Ratings were spiking, climbing like a rocket. The YouTube stream comments exploded, a torrent of digital cheers and jeers. "Caroline just nuked that argument," one comment screamed. "AOC holding her ground like a queen," another countered. But no one, from the most ardent partisan to the casual observer, could look away. The two women weren't talking over each other. They were slicing through ideology with surgical precision, each word a calculated blow. And for once, America wasn't watching two parties. They were watching two worldviews collide in real time. A spectacle that promised to reshape the political landscape. The moderator attempted to pivot, his voice a strained attempt at control. "Let's move to charter schools. Should public funds support them?" But his words were swallowed by the rising tide of the debate. Both women ignored him, their gazes locked, their personal battle far from concluded. They weren't done yet. AOC jabbed, her voice laced with a fresh wave of indignation. "You represent an administration that spent more time banning books than funding classrooms." It was a direct hit, aimed at the heart of conservative cultural policy.
Caroline smiled coldly, a predatory glint in her eye. "And you represent a generation that thinks banning failing ideas is oppression." The chamber buzzed, a collective gasp rippling through the audience. Neither would blink, neither would yield. And this, astonishingly, was only round one. The moderator's voice trembled slightly now, a clear sign of his losing grip. "We'll shift to climate education," but the audience, captivated, was no longer listening to him. Their attention was irrevocably locked on the raw, radiating tension from the stage. Caroline Leavitt had leaned forward, elbows on the desk, her eyes blazing like someone who had just dared the storm to strike, inviting its fury. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, meanwhile, remained perfectly upright, her posture radiating an almost unnatural control, as if she were physically restraining herself from erupting on camera, a volcano barely contained. Caroline struck first, her words a hammer blow. "You use classrooms as battlegrounds for your worldview. You're not teaching kids science. You're teaching them shame about being American, about energy independence, about success." AOC inhaled sharply, a visible tremor in her composure. She turned her full, undivided attention to Caroline, her voice a low, dangerous hiss. "I'd rather teach them truth than lies wrapped in patriotism. The world is burning. Your party wants to hand out matches." The crowd gasped, a collective intake of breath. That line, delivered with such venomous precision, would be in headlines by morning. Caroline, however, didn't flinch. "You preach apocalypse," she countered, her voice steady, almost mocking, "then blame farmers in Nebraska while flying private to climate panels in Europe." A visible crack, fleeting but undeniable, broke across AOC's carefully polished, calm expression. The mask of polished composure slipped, just for a second, enough for millions of Americans to screenshot it in real time, a moment of raw vulnerability exposed. But Caroline wasn't done. "And let's talk about accountability," she pressed, leaning in closer. "You rail against Wall Street, but your campaign fundraisers read like a Goldman Sachs Christmas list." That stung. Even the moderator blinked, momentarily speechless. Let's keep it policy-focused, ladies," he stammered. But ladies didn't apply anymore. These were warriors, and the battlefield was set. AOC fought back hard, her voice regaining its fire. "You call me fake, but you're parroting talking points from a man who tried to dismantle democracy. At least I stand for something." Caroline fired without pause, a rapid-fire retort. "I stand for the Constitution, not rewriting it every time it disagrees with your Instagram feed." Boom! Laughter and applause erupted from the studio audience, a chaotic symphony of approval and dissent. Behind the stage, aides were texting each other frantically. "Leavitt's killing it," one typed. "AOC better counter strong. This is war." And in the digital trenches, it was chaos. X, formerly Twitter, exploded with takes. TikTokers clipped and remixed the clash, creating viral content within minutes. YouTube streams titled "Caroline Shreds AOC Live" went viral within 15 minutes. Reels of Caroline's jab, "I stand for the Constitution," looping endlessly under the American flag. But something else, something deeper, began to emerge beneath the surface. Two stories, two Americas. AOC, raised in the Bronx, fueled by progressive fire. Caroline, with her New Hampshire roots, trained in conservative grit. The debate was no longer just about policy. It was about truth. Whose truth gets to shape the next generation? And both women, with chilling clarity, knew it. The studio felt like a courtroom now, except there was no judge, only the unyielding verdict of millions watching live. The final segment began in silence, a heavy, expectant quiet that swallowed the last echoes of the previous rounds. Cameras panned across the studio, catching every clenched jaw in the audience, every eye trained with unwavering intensity on the two women who had just redefined political confrontation. The moderator, visibly rattled, cleared his throat, a small nervous sound in the vast stillness. "Closing thoughts, 1 minute each." He turned to AOC first. She leaned in, her voice calm, almost eerily so. but simmering with an undeniable heat beneath the surface. You've heard a lot tonight, but let me be clear. This country is not suffering from too much progress. It's suffering from leaders who romanticize the past, who want to drag us back to a time when too many of us were silent, unseen, and powerless. That's not patriotism. That's regression. I fight to move us forward together. A tight, strategic smile played on her lips. Applause rippled from her side of the audience, but it wasn't deafening, a testament to the shift in the room's dynamic. The camera swung to Caroline. She didn't smile. She didn't posture. She simply spoke, her voice cutting through the remaining tension. Power is not giving louder speeches. It's listening to the voices no one wants to hear. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. My generation was told we had to pick a side, that if we questioned lockdowns, we were anti-science. If we believed in borders, we were xenophobes. If we prayed in public, we were the problem. You taught us division, then blamed us for it. Murmurs, a low hum of recognition spread through the crowd. Phones lifted, recording every word, every nuance of her delivery. Caroline stepped closer to the mic, her gaze sweeping across the studio, then settling finally directly on AOC. I'm not here to be the face of conservatism. I'm here to be a mirror for millions of Americans who are told to shut up, sit down, and nod along while elites redefine their values. She looked directly at AOC, her eyes unwavering. You say I romanticize the past. No, I remember it. When faith, family, and freedom weren't punchlines. When being a strong woman didn't mean parroting a party line. AOC raised an eyebrow, a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes, but said nothing. Caroline went on, her voice gaining a quiet, formidable power. I'm not fighting against progress. I'm fighting for a version of it that doesn't erase people like my grandmother, who fled communism, people like my brother who served overseas, women like my mom who ran a small business without a government lifeline. The air thickened. No cheering, no clapping, just the profound silence of a crowd hit by something unexpected, conviction that didn't scream, but simply stood. Caroline finished, her voice a final, decisive stroke. This isn't left or right anymore. It's real versus fake, and I won't be quiet just because the script says I should. She stepped back, and for the first time all night, AOC didn't respond. She just stared, calculating, rattled. The studio lights dimmed for the outro, but no one moved. No one dared break the spell, because no matter what happened next, the war of words had a clear winner in the room, and everyone watching knew it. The credits didn't roll. Not yet. The cameras were off, but the energy in the room was radioactive. Backstage, Caroline walked past producers, stagehands, and makeup artists, some staring in open awe, others nodding silently in acknowledgement. She didn't need cheers. She had impact. In a quiet corner near the emergency exit, her assistant handed her a bottle of water and whispered, "You just made national headlines." She took a slow sip, her thoughts still echoing the final words she spoke on stage. Her phone buzzed, a dozen missed calls, over 100 messages. She opened one from her father. "Your grandfather would have been proud. You stood tall, no fear." Her throat tightened, but she blinked back emotion. Now wasn't the time for tears. It was time to prepare for the storm. A few yards away, AOC stood with her team, her face calm, but her arms crossed tighter than usual. She spoke quietly, fast. "Don't post anything yet. Let's see how it plays." Her strategist replied, "We're getting blowback. Not from the right, from the independents." AOC frowned. She's dangerous, too composed. They'll confuse control with character. She looked toward the shadows. Caroline was watching her. For a split second, their eyes met. No words, just understanding. This wasn't personal. It was deeper, a cultural collision long overdue. Back outside, headlines were already swarming the web. Leavitt's calm fury leaves AOC off balance. Young conservative versus progressive icon, a new era of debate. No one expected that ending. But Caroline wasn't celebrating. She stood by the curb under the studio lights, alone now, the wind teasing strands of her hair. She pulled out a small silver pendant from under her blazer, her mother's cross, and held it tight for a moment. Not as a statement, but as a reminder that you can speak softly and still shake mountains. That real power doesn't shout, it stands. And tonight, she hadn't just stood her ground, she shifted it. Washington never sleeps, especially not after a broadcast like that. By sunrise, the internet was ablaze. Clips of the debate racked up millions of views in hours. TikTok was split into factions. Twitter X boiled with takes. Network anchors scrambled to book follow-ups, and both women were now trending, but for very different reasons. Caroline Leavitt didn't bask in the spotlight. She went back to work. In her modest office, lit by the pale morning sun, she scrolled through feedback, noting not the applause, but the confusion, the curiosity, even the rare confessions from viewers who said, "I didn't agree with you, but I listened." She smiled, not because she'd won, but because she'd cut through. In a world where shouting is currency, she used clarity like a scalpel. Meanwhile, in a swankier corner of D.C., AOC sat with her inner circle. Her team ran numbers, analyzed sentiment, tweaked their messaging. "She wasn't supposed to land that hard," one aide muttered. AOC leaned back, quiet for once. Maybe the firebrand from the Bronx had finally met her match, not in rage, but in resolve. And maybe America needed both of them, not to agree, but to clash clearly, so the country could see the difference. One woman shouted for the future, the other stood for the past. But somewhere in the middle was a generation watching and deciding. In an era of noise, sometimes it takes two voices, one blazing with fire, the other rooted like stone, to reveal what truly matters. Caroline Leavitt didn't come to play politics. She came to remind people they still had the right to believe what they believe. And when Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez met her on that stage, it wasn't just a debate. It was a collision. One that echoed beyond the studio into the soul of a nation still deciding who it wants to be. Red State Heat met Bronx Fire, and no one walked away untouched. Thank you for immersing yourself in this intense political showdown. If you were gripped by the clash of these two titans, don't forget to like this story, share it with your friends, and leave a comment below with your thoughts on who truly won the debate. And for more captivating narratives and in-depth analysis, be sure to subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us bring more powerful stories to life.